Jaime, perhaps the most versatile commander in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. A strong spearman commander, and the core of the weakness synergy. Jaime, possibly one of the strongest commanders players, can invest into out of the entire game's selection. So let's see. Jaime, focusing on spearmen, provides spearman defense and spearman health of 76 and 74%, and total attack stats of 40.8%. Reliable for spearman front lines and still providing stats for multiple lines. But more importantly, Jaime's awakening skill, Hear Me Roar, after healing on any lineup has been received. That lineup will now launch weakness attacks, which stack a damage buff against after every consecutive hit against the lineup with the most loses. Stacking buff is plus 3% damage every hit they received from the weakness effect. This damage scaling, multiplying previous damage by 1.03, quickly stacks up total damage scaling. By the 5th attack, your line will deal 545 total damage, or an additional 0.45 normal attacks worth of damage. By the 10th attack, you will deal 1165 total damage, or another 1.65 normal attacks worth of damage. And upon the 15th attack, you will deal a total of 1860 damage, or 3.6 normal attacks worth of damage, and by 20th attack, you will deal 2630 damage, or 6.3 normal attacks worth of additional damage. The damage which Jaime can provide is significant when you're able to fight single troop type casts, such as bow traps, which flood their castles with trash low-tier bows. Jaime will shred through these lines, stacking extremely high weakness stacks as they attack single troops types, which leads us onto the second most critical part of his kit, as it's not restricted to a single line, as long as you have the healers Enzo, Lats, or Drake, and for premium options right now, Sararar, and their respective troop type they heal. As long as healing is received, which will happen regardless if the heal is 0, weakness is triggered and all weakness attacks stack unto the core stack. So 2 troop types, both with healers or double weakness, yes, will stack weakness nearly twice as effectively. Or in short, instead of 15% stack per second, jumps up to 30% and 45% with a third healer. Onto the actual second part of Jaime's skill, which whereby weakness attacks cannot be disarmed. This is critical for countering the female lineup, which relies on its high burst damage and disarm effects. Now with Jaime, this counter is eliminated and your troops will ignore the disarm effect and continue attacking. Do note that weakness will target the line with the most loses. As is the case, they'll stack their weakness buff on that target. But once they switch targets, this stack is reset. This can be seen as a negative, especially when you keep switching targets. It can be hard to say how much overall damage the lineup will provide. But consider this, by the 21st attack, your line will hit that target for an additional 63% damage. For the whole second, your additional damage from weakness will add up to 3.45 normal, which is nearly a 70% overall damage increase for that second of battle. But now, onto the lineups for Jaime's weakness. Jaime will require some form of healing to trigger his weakness attacks, which will last for 5 seconds. As mentioned before, you'll require a healer among us Drake, Enzo, or Lats, and/or the premium option of Sararar. For this, we will be using Drake. Now we have 3 more commander slots to choose from. We will go through some the weakness-based commanders options and their basic roles now from free-to-play to premium. Urslan provides a small single-line heal Gorel, which will provide a defense shred, however will not work with weakness attacks. Winton, who will silence 1 random enemy commander after 50 weakness attacks have been launched, lasts for 12 seconds or about 1 enemy active cast, and lastly for free-to-play options. Arya, who will increase her active damage right before she launches her attack by 20%. Now, onto the premium options, Patello, who will increase your total attack stat damage by 30% and decrease the amount of damage you take by a flat 8%. Although he does not yet have his weapon, Patello is a very strong low-spending weakness option. Hector, who is more a specialized option for weakness, healing your troops after active army damage is received. You can use him to trigger your weakness attacks at 10 seconds, which will sync up with Drake's healing, but more importantly, is used to counter female lineups, as Salma, who will launch all commander actives at 1 second into the battle, will be countered by Hector, reducing the damage you receive and blocking any disarm effects which may be inflicted onto you. As the healer is required, 2 slots in your lineup are used. As such, the remaining options should be either to buff the stats of your army, provide some type of utility, or even entire counters to enemy lineups through extremely high damage reduction commanders like Diana or Dani through their skill, or the more offensive side like as mentioned Dani, Iremiden and Sarare, or counter options against the female synergy like Baelish. As Jaime is very flexible, unlike Sinara, he will not restrict other commanders' skills or active abilities, which means he can combine with the female synergy, utilizing Leela, Salma, and 1 more female commander to gain the benefits of female power synergy. However, to maximize this, we will need to run infantry and utilize Lats to trigger Jaime. Although we can still run with Drake and have a double weakness female lineup, which gains a very high damage output from Jaime, while still gaining some benefit from the female active synergy. Moving on to Jaime's weapon, it's very simple, only increasing the effectiveness of the weakness stacks from 3% up to 3.5% with base weapon, and at max level up to 6% weakness damage per hit. Do remember his weapon is acquired from the archery event currently, being quite costly to acquire, although a significant boost to his power. If you're considering purchasing this weapon before you do, please make sure your lineup is at least fairly built. Enhancing the lineup through other commanders' effects boosts the effectiveness of weakness in terms of a cost sense. Our suggestion will be at least Hector and another healer commander for double weakness builds. We really highly suggest to invest into a second healer commander instead of Jaime's base weapon for the start. It cannot be undermined how strong double weakness is. And for defense, whether that be in your home castle or defending a city or alliance, double or better yet triple weakness is the best option. Speaking more about Jaime on defense, without a doubt, the strongest defensive lineup, whether it be defending a building in alliance conquest, city sieges, or your home defense. Triple weakness is by far, if your limes are strong enough, it will rely on your stats being decent enough on your second and third line for damage, but their main purpose is to stack even more weakness attacks onto your opponent. There are major counters to multi-line armies such as Daeron for bleed, Cersei for female, and Sae for weakness lineups, as these commanders have a whole army attack skill which hits all lines opposing them. But at a base level, at the 14-second mark when weakness attacks will be launched, there will be 15 attacks stacking a 3% weakness stack, which will total to 3.65 normal attacks worth of damage, or an over 70% damage increase. This damage will be split between your 3 lines, assuming you won't have balanced stats between all of them and taking into account one will counter. One will have reduced damage and the other will have base damage or no counter effect to them. This 70% figure isn't all correct, but consider that you will continually stack up large amounts of damage, and by second one into your weakness attack, your lines will be dealing plus 50% damage all the way up to the last attack at plus 90% damage. Only 2 seconds into weakness and your lines will nearly deal double the damage. And of course, this effect will significantly increase with and the higher levels of Jaime's weapon. To quickly touch on Jaime's effectiveness for rebels and training ground, he seems to underperform compared to other paid options, but compared to lower-end choices, his defensive shred and high stats are very reliable. We will go more in depth for weakness in the future.